considered legitimate to fight to defend or preserve the claimed territorial boundaries of the state or of the individual. So, for example, if one's country or land was invaded or attacked, then that would be legitimate to fight against, even if the people themselves were not going to be harmed. That's the distinction I'm trying to draw. So let's say that an outside conqueror were going to come in and take over the land and said, it's okay, we're not going to harm the people at all. You'll all be just fine. It would still be considered legitimate within jihad theory for the state to take actions to defend and preserve its boundaries. And similarly, an individual has the right to take up arms to prevent the takeover of their property. And of course, just war has been defined in different ways too. So that's not a categorical difference, but it's just a point that's worth mentioning. Also, classical jihad theory legitimated offensive fighting in the context of state building or empire building, that is the expansion of territorial boundaries of the state. What this assumes is the non-enduring quality of territorial boundaries. So we live in a day, in an age where nations have boundaries and they're kind of recognized internationally. But if you imagine a time prior to this, prior to the modern period, where empires and kingdoms bumped up right against each other and were constantly jostling for territory, you kind of, the assumption was that you were always in the process of negotiating and holding on to the boundaries of your land. So jihad theory assumes that the Muslim state will always be seeking to expand or at least preserve its boundaries. So this speaks then to the question of right intention, or justice, because justice itself then is defined slightly differently. It is considered just to build an empire, because the idea is that if you don't have strong states, you will have weak powers. And weak powers will constantly be fighting one another. And when you have feudal lords constantly fighting each other, then people will suffer from violence and instability. So it's always considered preferable within classical jihad theory to have strong states that provide stability for societies so that there can be cultural growth and development, and so that law and order may be established. So there's a fundamental assumption that states are good. Another couple of points, because I don't want to go on too long here, is that a second component of this definition of justice or right intention that cannot be ignored is that from the perspective of the Muslim jurists, the job of the Muslim nation or the Islamic people as the chosen people of God was that they had the mission of spreading the word of God. And the best way to spread the word of God, if you lived in the medieval period, was to convince the ruler. Because if the ruler adopted the religion, then the rest of the people would adopt the religion. And so warfare had not conversion as its objective, but opening up territory for dawah, or the mission. And so these are areas that are contested by Muslims today, or challenged by Muslims today, but certainly classical theory did assume a kind of religious objective to territorial expansion and warfare.
Judaism has a different approach, as can be seen by the numbers. The fact that there are about 13 million Jews in the world. How many Muslims? More than a billion? More. And those 13 million Jews, most of them live in one apartment building on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. That's like our patient zero. Judaism has never fought wars to expand Judaism or to spread the word, because Judaism is not a missionizing religion. As in all seriousness, you can tell by the numbers. That I like to joke and say we have enough problems with the people that we have. Don't give us, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Even though that was written by a Jew, of course, as with all great literature. Such as the New Testament, but we won't go into that. Judaism, this idea of a just war is one that is, as I said before, a milchemet mitzvah or a milchemet chova is an obligatory war, one that you have to fight either because it is commanded to save a life, namely to save your life or save the lives around you. A discretionary war would be one to expand territory, but it's specifically the biblical territory of Israel, which in today's context is pretty much a moot point. But we have to remember that with Jewish concepts of a just war, or Jewish concepts of the morality of armed conflict as well, most of this was thought up in a vacuum. For 2,000 years, possibly with the exception of we in Texas, Jews didn't have guns. For more than 2,000 years, there was no such thing as a Jewish state. Jews were subject to the, universally subject to laws of other states. Historically, Jews did much better under Islam than under Christianity because of Jews' status as dhimmi, or as the people of the book. And we won't talk about the Crusades. I know let's just pretend it didn't happen, okay? Yeah. That's very popular among some leaders around the world. We'll pretend that some things never happened. But it was not until 1948 that with the creation of the State of Israel that Jews finally we had to figure out how do we make these concepts of a just war, or concepts of milchemet chova, the idea of the biblical injunctions, particularly from the 20s in Deuteronomy, that tell us that we have to call for peace before going to war, that you certainly offer terms of peace multiple times, that when you go to war you take every opportunity to stop it before it happens, and then once it happens you have to engage in particular rules, to abide by specific laws and values when you're fighting, even if your enemy is not held to those same values, that you have to balance maintaining the dignity of human life with the necessity of fighting that war. And the armed conflict, the question of the morality of armed conflict is that when all else fails, in order to preserve the spirit or the value that it was that would lead you to the conflict with words in the first place, that if it escalates, then it is commanded. And as for this pacifist tradition in Judaism, there is a pacifist tradition in Judaism, but it's not very large. And it particularly was tested during the Second World War. The seminary from which I graduated, there was a professor who died years before I got there, but I had heard stories about him. His name was Abraham Kronbach, and he was most notable because he officiated at the funerals of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. And Kronbach was a professor from just after World War I until he died in the 1960s, and he maintained his pacifism even to the point of saying that America should not have gotten involved in World War II. And I think that was just about the end of, at least in my mind, mainstream Judaism's legitimization of pacifism, because to say that Jews shouldn't defend themselves in the Warsaw Ghetto, or that just to go quietly like lambs to the slaughter, does not place a value on human life. And one last point of clarification, because I see it on billboards everywhere, with the 10 Commandments. One of the 10 Commandments does not say thou shalt not kill.